think to my own prize giving in this very hall almost 20 years ago. How did I feel knowing that I was about to embark on the start of my adult life? Well, I was very scared. My life up until university was what I would have called pretty sheltered. I grew up in Marlow, at a time when it was still very villagey. Now you could probably call it a town, but at the time when I grew up it was still very villagey. I spent the majority of my time studying and playing hockey. As Mrs. Crowley mentioned, I was at Wycombe High from the middle of year 9, so I joined in 1994 and stayed until the end of sixth form, and I did A-levels in Spanish, history, politics and IT. I was shy, not very socially adept, and I knew very little about the real world. Now you have to remember that this was a time when there was no social media, and even internet access was limited to one computer in the school library, and that had a dial-up connection. Do any of you know what a dial-up connection is? And even then, the internet access only came in when I was in year 12. If my 18-year-old self was to look back and see where I am now, she probably wouldn't believe that it was me. Now, I left school wanting to pursue a career in journalism, and all my decisions between GCSEs and graduating all focused on that one aim. So my A-level choices, the decision to take a gap year so that I could build up some work experience, the choice of my degree, the decision that in my spare time at university I was going to get more work experience. All of this was meant to lead into a job at a magazine, a newspaper, a television station, or a radio station. However, things didn't quite work out like that. And what I'd like to do this evening, rather than just stand here and reel off a list of the things that I've done since leaving school, I want to be a bit more three-dimensional. And what I'd like to do is I'd like to use my experiences to demonstrate to all of you that paths aren't necessarily set, nor is there necessarily a predetermined route to where you want to get to, nor is there necessarily a predetermined time scale for you to get to where you want to be. And also that the support that you build around you may be one of the most crucial things that you ever do. It's like Martin Luther King said, it's about taking that very first step, even if you can't see the whole staircase. Now, I went to Manchester University and I did a degree in European Studies and Spanish, mainly because I wanted to study lots of different subjects that I enjoyed, but I also wanted to hone these skills that I was going to need for this planned career in journalism. With that degree, I was able to study politics and history, but also Spanish and Dutch. I had a wonderful time in Manchester, and I also got to spend a year in Madrid teaching English. And in all of this time, I was also building up work experience within the media. So I was writing for the student newspaper, I was doing shows on university radio, I was taking part in mentor schemes, where at one point I even spent the day at the Granada studios up in Manchester, and I was learning all about television documentary production. I continued to play hockey throughout university. It was very much a case of I studied hard, but I also played hard. I became more streetwise. I went clubbing for the first time in my life. I had a part-time job in a modern and progressive theatre, and eventually I came out with a first-class degree. Now, I actually wanted to stay in Manchester after graduating, and I spent a year there doing temporary work whilst trying to look for a permanent job. And this was a great way of developing a wide range of skills, but also building on the experience that I'd already started to get during my gap year and whilst at university. I spent some time as a non-academic support worker for students with disabilities, providing services like note-taking, amanuensis, and personal care support. Now, these students had varied disabilities, so things like hearing impairment, learning disabilities. I had one student who had quite severe cerebral palsy. Little did I know then that my world would actually come full circle, and that kind of work would eventually be the making of me. Now, I graduated at a time, we're in 2003 now, there were very few graduate jobs available. All the media jobs that I went for were essentially asking me to work for free for about a year. And this actually really annoyed me, because I'd spent so much time gaining all of this experience during my gap year and whilst at university precisely because I didn't want that to happen. Plus, with a student debt, I couldn't afford to work for free. So after numerous applications, interviews, and lots of rejections, which was highly demoralising actually, considering I had a first-class degree, 2 languages, and all this work experience, eventually I was offered a job at a business information services company based in Reading. Now, I'm going to let you into a secret here. I didn't even know that such an industry existed before I went for this interview. Basically, what the company does is that it analyses business press from different countries in the local languages. And then it translates them and it sends it out in reports so that companies can formulate their business strategy. Although at the beginning I wasn't going to be using my languages because I'd been placed within the North American and the Caribbean team, I knew that there was potential there. And actually, within 3 months, I did move, and I was moved to the Latin American team where I was using my Spanish. And it's funny actually, because I was using my Spanish, but translation was the one part of my degree that I didn't really like. It just goes to show that sometimes where needs must. And I actually really love translation now. I quickly progressed in the company, and eventually I became deputy team leader of the Latin American team in record time actually. I joined the company in 2004, and I was asked to become deputy team leader within a year. It was very much a case of being in the right place at the right time. And I have to say, sometimes that's all it is. 2 years later, I was then asked to move back to the team that I'd originally joined, which was the North American and Caribbean team, but this time as team leader. And I then went on to spend 5 years, more or less learning on the job as to how to manage a team of people. Now, following a restructuring of the firm, in June 2011, my team was disbanded. And I was given the option that I could either take redundancy, or I could take 2 steps down. I could become a pure analyst again. Now, I decided to go for the latter for a variety of reasons, one of which I will talk about in a bit. I'm still working at the company. I'm working now for the Mediterranean team, dealing with press from Spain. And I also work full-time from home now. So I've been at the company for 12 and a half years. Now, the idea had been that I was going to be at the company for a few years and then I was going to move on because I still wanted this planned career in journalism. Plus, these days, people rarely stay any longer than 3 or 4 years at any company, let alone the 12 and a half that I've been with embark. However, in 2008, so this is 4 years after I joined the company, I was diagnosed with multiple sclerosis. And this really put a spanner in the works in terms of my career plans. However, unbeknownst to me at that time, it's where my journey to become the person that I always wanted to be really began. Now, being diagnosed with MS was a complete bolt out of the blue. I was 28, was otherwise very healthy, still playing loads of hockey, and obviously working full time. I'd never contemplated that I'd ever be diagnosed with something that could very well mean I could wake up tomorrow and not have one of my bodily functions. So, for example, I could have limb paralysis, or I could have speech difficulties. Now, for those of you who don't know, MS is an autoimmune condition. This means the immune system becomes faulty and it starts to attack healthy tissue. In the case of MS, it attacks healthy tissue in the brain and the spinal cord, which means your nerve signals are disrupted. I have the relapsing remitting form of the disease, which means I have periods of attacks where I experience symptoms, and then I go into a so-called remission where the symptoms either get better or they may disappear completely. Symptoms are unpredictable and wide-ranging. I've previously lost the strength in both my hands. I've completely lost the feeling down one side of my body. I've experienced muscle spasms and neuropathic pain. I've had sensory issues such as permanent pins and needles. And I also have MS fatigue. Now, you never know when your next relapse is going to come. There is no way to predict it. Nor do you know how long it will last, how aggressive it's going to be, or what part of the body it's going to affect. So it's a very, very unpredictable condition to live with. Now, when life throws you a challenge, I really believe it's not about the challenge itself, it's about how you deal with it that shapes you as an individual. Myself and my family weren't given much guidance as to where to go to for extra support and help and information after I was diagnosed. And we spent a year on a very steep learning curve, trying to learn as much as we could about this condition. But it was this experience that set me on the path to making sure that others potentially would have an easier time with it. Being diagnosed totally changed my view on life. It made me really think about what was important to me and all the things that I wanted to do that might become harder in the future. But it shouldn't have to take a life-changing condition for that to happen. And my first piece of advice for all of you ladies here tonight is make the most of your now. It's so easy to put things off for another time. That's a luxury that I didn't feel that I had any longer. So I made a bucket list of sorts and I started to tick things off. I went snowboarding for the first time in my 30s, although whether you could call it snowboarding is debatable because I actually spent most of my time on my bottom, just sliding down in the snow. I took up Zumba, I went to my first ballet, and I went to a Michelin star restaurant. Some of the things on my bucket list are big, some of them are small, but they're all things that I've always wanted to do. I also turned my attention to the charity work that I've always done in some shape or form, more towards MS and disability organisations. This has included becoming a patron and ambassador for several organisations, writing, which is great, because as I said, I'd always wanted to be a journalist, vlogging, reviewing research proposals, speaking at events to raise awareness, and campaigning, amongst many other things. Yes, I've won several awards for my work, and you don't do it for the awards, you do it because you want to help people. But yes, it's always nice when people recognise what you've done. So I was named MS Society Volunteer of the Year in 2013. I've also been recognised by Sue Ryder with their Southern Women of Achievement Award, and I also received the Precious Leadership Award this year. Through everything that I've done, I've discovered what I feel I was always meant to do in life. It's filled a void that I didn't even know was there. And it's enabled me to become that person who would be unrecognisable to my 18-year-old self. Now, why do I say unrecognisable? Why is that? Well, just the fact that I'm stood here in a room full of mostly strangers. I say mostly because some of my old teachers are here. And I'm talking in front of you all. That would have terrified the life out of me at 18. At school, I was so shy, I wouldn't even put my hand up in class when I knew the answer to a question. I'd dread having to give presentations, and I'd pray that the teachers wouldn't ask me to explain something in front of the whole class. Now, I give presentations to audiences of all sizes, with my biggest to date being to over 400 delegates at a healthcare professionals conference. I've spoken alongside Samantha Cameron at 10 Downing Street for a charity reception, and I frequently speak on the radio about issues related to MS, disability and chronic illness. So what's the difference now? Well, one difference is that I found my passion and purpose. It wasn't deliberate, I'm not going to pretend that it was, it just happened. But the important thing is that I recognised it and I've developed it. When you have a passion, you don't mind coming out of your comfort zone. You don't mind doing things that might scare you, because it's the passion that drives you forward. The world is in need of people who are passionate about what they do. Now, amongst you girls, if you've already found your passion, my next piece of advice tonight is nurture it. Make it part of who you are, because passion will be sure to create some of your finest moments. Now, it's possible to do things alone. I'm not going to say it's not, but it can be harder. And support for me has been key in getting to where I am. And I'm not just talking about mental and physical support because of my MS. I'm also talking about being able to learn from the people around you. I was out with a friend the other day. We'd not been out socially for a while. I don't get a huge amount of time to socialise these days. And he remarked that it was amazing to see the change in me. He's known me for years, and we'd gone to a birthday party where basically the only people I knew was this friend that I'd gone with and the birthday boy himself. I walked in to a room full of strangers, and he said you'd never have been able to tell. I struck up conversations with people that I didn't know. I made new friends, and I really enjoyed it. And I said to him, I've learnt it from my mum. My mum accompanies me to most things as my support partner because of my MS. And she's always had the confidence in a room full of strangers that I've always wished that I had. In the past, I'd walk into a room full of strangers and I'd go and stand by a wall or hide in the corner and hope that nobody noticed me. So I've observed my mum. I've listened to how she starts conversations. That's really, really important. Learn from the people who you admire. Surround yourself with people who you want to be like. Finally, I'd like to invite you all to step into worlds that you've never experienced before. I can't go home tonight without having mentioned Strictly Come Dancing. There are key moments that you know are going to change your life forever. My diagnosis with MS was obviously one, and Strictly Come Dancing was definitely another. So I was chosen as one of 6 people out of over 11,000 nominations to take part in the first ever People Strictly for Comic Relief on BBC One last year. It was a 4-part spin-off of Strictly Come Dancing, and I was paired with, a lot of you probably know him, Aliash Shkonianit, to dance a jive in front of millions of television viewers, all in aid of charity. I was chosen because of my charity work. I was entering a world that was completely alien to anything I've ever known before. Now, I'm not going to lie, it was a complete dream come true. but it also challenged me, both mentally and physically. It pushed me to my limits, and I learned so much about myself and what I was capable of. Now, I'm not going to stand here and say to all of you, go out and be on a television show, but stepping into different worlds is also possible through other things. Through, for example, travelling. It's possible through doing voluntary work, where you may be meeting people or doing things which are outside of your normal work and social circles. It's possible through taking up a new hobby or learning something new. Soak up all these new experiences that you're going to have. But I'd also say, be aware of the effect that they might have on you, because that's one way that you'll be able to find your passion if you haven't already. Now, when people first find out that I have MS, one of the first reactions I get is, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. And I say, you know what? Don't be. Some of the best and most important moments in my life have been because of my MS. I've had some amazing experiences because of my MS. And most importantly, I've met some of the most inspirational, strong, and wonderful people because of my MS. Life hasn't turned out the way that I planned it, and my 18-year-old self wouldn't have accepted that. I planned everything, and when things didn't go to plan, I would become extremely disappointed. I still remember how angry I was when I left university and nobody would give me a job, despite all of my forward planning, the first class degree, and all the experience I had. There was a sense of entitlement there, where I felt that that job was owed to me because I'd supposedly done all the right things. Now, I realise that the important thing isn't whether something goes to plan or not, it's how you react and what you do if it doesn't. I've also learned that it's okay to be scared, it's okay to ask for help, and it's also okay for things to go wrong in your life. Because actually, that's often when you learn the most. There's a quotation I'd like to share with all of you now, and I don't know who said it. I found it on the internet one day. The internet's a wonderful thing. I put it up on my Instagram because I absolutely loved it. And I think it's a really great piece of advice, particularly at this time when you're all about to embark on this next stage of your lives. It goes, be around the light bringers, the magic makers, the world shifters, the game shakers. They challenge you, break you open, uplift and expand you. They don't let you play small with your life. These heartbeats are your people. These people are your tribe. So I urge you all to go out and find your tribes. Dream big and enjoy the journey that lies ahead with all its twists, turns, highs, lows, and occasional bumps in the road. Because you never know whether it's that bump that will make you fly. Now for me, that bump was being diagnosed with a life-changing condition. But I can say life-changing now with 2 hats on. It's like the hat fell off. I can say life-changing now with 2 hats on. Because it's actually changed my life in ways that I could never have imagined. Now before I go, I'd like to just say to all of you, if you'd like to come and talk to me afterwards, then please do. I wouldn't have had the courage to at 18 if somebody had come to the school and given a presentation or a talk I wouldn't have had the courage to go up and speak to them afterwards. One of the lasting memories that I have of my A-level politics class is of a girl called Sabah, who, much to the horror of Mrs. Pearce, who sat in the front row, we were at a politics conference in London, and Sabah chased Seb Coe down the road outside the Houses of Parliament just because she wanted to speak with him. And I thought then, despite the fact that Mrs. Pearce was absolutely horrified, I thought then, wow, I wish I had the courage to do that. So if you'd like to come and talk to me afterwards about anything that I've spoken about tonight, then just come and find me. Even if it's you just want to know what goes on behind the scenes at Strictly. Now I'm going to leave you with something from the actor Tom Hiddleston, and I think it's really appropriate, probably for many of you going forward, but particularly for me and my story. He once said, "You never know what's around the corner. It could be everything, or it could be nothing. You keep putting one foot in front of the other, and then one day you look back and you've climbed a mountain." Thank you.